Buona tarda, buenas tardes, good afternoon. We are streaming live from the Center for Contemporary Culture in Barcelona. This is Sónar+D CCCB. We are about to start the last panel of Sónar+D CCCB, but there will be concerts afterwards, so don't go anywhere, and please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Now we are going to enjoy music technology, music industry panel called Futurepulse, Forecasting Success in the Music Industry. Can we forecast success? Actually, I think that success has been mostly forecasted with intuition throughout history, but I'm sure that data can help. And this is what we are going to discover, among other things, with this panel in which will participate Sakis Nezana Markovic from Playground Music Scandinavia, Dr. Sophie Brueggemann from Spinning Records, David Weisfield from Soundcharts, and it will be moderated by Daniel Johansson from Soundtrack Your Brand. So here we go, Futurepulse.
I got a long, 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 long way to go, and I don't know where I'm coming from, so I travel on. All that I need is somebody to tell me where to turn. All my roads leading nowhere, and I can feel no love, yeah. I got a long, 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 long way to go, and I don't know where I'm coming from, so I travel on. I got a long, 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 long way to go, and I don't know where I'm coming from, so I travel on. Wake up in the morning, it's a fever I never felt before. Falling into pieces once again. I got nowhere to go, got nowhere to go, yeah. I got a long, 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 long way to go, and I don't know where I'm coming from, so I travel on. I got a long, 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 long way to go, and I don't know where I'm coming from, so I travel on. I got a long, 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 long way to go, and I don't know where I'm coming from, so I travel on. I got a long, 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 long way to go, and I don't know where I'm coming from, so I travel on. I got a long, 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 long way to go, and I don't know where I'm coming from, so I travel on.
Okay. Are we go? Are we live?
You are live, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Antonia, for the introduction. And the
You're welcome.
video that you saw here was kind of a short presentation of short presentation of the Futurepulse project, which is an EU finance project by Horizon 2020. It is also partly financed by the music industry, by the actors that are involved in this project. I'm very sorry, but I have a really disturbing fly in here. I told everyone before that this is going to destroy everything, but okay, I'll wave a little bit like this sometimes. Anyhow, this project is focused on, as you saw in the video, trying to forecast and predict popularity and success in 3 layers. So we have genres, trying to forecast the popularity of genres. We have the popularity of artists, and then we have the popularity of tracks or songs. And I think we will discuss all of these areas within this panel, although we will not focus so much on Futurepulse, because I'm very happy to say that we have some of the brightest minds in Europe, and even, I mean, David is in Mexico, but still from Europe, when it comes to data analysis and understanding how to analyze data and connect this to success and popularity. So I think we will have a very interesting discussion. I know that this is the last panel, so we have prepared about 400 graphs that we're going to show you. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, we're not going to do that. We will try to have it an open discussion about this, and hopefully we can get some questions in the end about what you think about it, because it's not a very easy question to talk about. I mean, if you look at human and the humankind, predictions, the possibility to make predictions is really hardwired into our brains. So from an evolutionary standpoint, one could say that there are 2 things that are really important, and that is our possibility to create languages, advanced symbols for communication. And then prediction is really another thing that has, if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, made it possible for humans to come where we are. The possibility to not only foresee what is going to happen in 1 second or 10 seconds when the bear is attacking you, but actually think that if I do this and then I do that and this is where I will end up in 1 week or 1 month. So it's really hardwired into it. And just a short anecdote, because even though we like to predict stuff, things can go really wrong. When I did my PhD studies 15 years ago, I'm from Sweden. I'm sitting south of Gothenburg in Sweden. And as you know, the situation in 2005 in Sweden was quite bad for the music industry. Everyone was file sharing, and the Pirate Bay had just been released, and we had a situation where everyone was looking at the Swedish music industry as really the bad example of how things could go wrong. So I started my PhD studies in this situation. And at the time, I guess all of you are aware of the so-called Moore's law, which describes the increase in processing power in relation to pricing. And there's another law that was called Kreider's law that was the same thing for storage capacity. So when I started my PhD studies and research on the music industry, everyone was downloading MP3 files. The storage capacity was increasing really, really fast according to Kreider's law. So when extrapolating for this development, I foresaw that we would have this continued increase in storage capacity, and around now, 2019, 2020, a regular hard drive would be able to store all the music that had ever been released, about a little bit over 200 million songs, a little bit more than 1 petabyte if you compress it. So that was the prediction I made there because of the circumstances. Everyone was downloading. We had just got iTunes, so everyone was starting to buy, or not in Sweden, but in other countries, people started to buy songs from iTunes. So for me, it was natural to extrapolate that situation in that time to how will it look into the future. Now, what we couldn't foresee at the time was how fast bandwidth would increase when it comes to mobile phone, and how smartphones was released, I would say in 2008 first, when the iPhone was released. and the development of the streaming sector as a result of that. So if you look at hard drives now, instead of having 1 petabyte in a regular hard drive, we have 4 terabyte or 8 terabyte or even 16 terabyte on some big personal hard drives. Now the thing is that I was really convinced about this prediction, and it actually got into media in Sweden. So I was interviewed, and it was everyone was talking about this. This is a good prediction. Thankfully, everyone has forgotten it. Now I mention it again, but it's just an example of when you try to predict something out of the situation where you are now. You can even have a long time series of evolution, but it still gets wrong if you don't foresee wildcards happening in the future. And I think for the music sector, this is really, really true. It's sometimes very hard to understand things that is going to happen and try to predict popularity. Okay, that was an introduction. Now, without further ado, I would really like to introduce the panel. Let's start with Sophie.
Hey, well, my name is Sophie, and I've been working in label environments as well as at Gracenote in the metadata department over the course of the past 8 years. Currently, I'm leading the analytics department at Spin Records, and one of my biggest projects here was developing a reporting platform, which really helped them make more data-driven decisions across departments. So I work very interdisciplinary from the marketing departments, try to combine insights from product as well as business development, which has been received quite well. In addition, I did some research project for my doctoral degree in usage behavior, specifically on Spotify, where I look a bit more into the details of how is an audience composed and how can you define audiences of specific artists. And yeah, I got first of all into the music industry by starting my career at Sony Music, more specifically in the classical department in Germany. And I quickly hit a barrier where I realized they're not using data at all. There was something going wrong at that time back then. And that gave me the push to work my way into data analytics in music, and I'm still on it.
Very interesting. I think we will come back to that question about some parts of the music industry still not really using data in the way it's possible to do. So I think we will come back to that later in this panel. Thank you very much, Sophie. Okay, Saki.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Saki Markovic. It's great to be here. I'm a huge fan of the Sónar Festival and the conference. I was there in person last year, had the time of my life. So I'm heading up the social media marketing team at Playground Music. And Playground Music is one of the biggest indie labels in Scandinavia. We have our own repertoire as well as representing a lot of different labels around the world in the Nordic countries. So we work with a lot of different types of music. We work with Mando Diao, the band that was featured in the introduction video. So we've been using, I'm also heading up leading the record label pilot within the Futurepulse project. So we've been using a lot of our artists and repertoire to sort of try and predict success, as we're going to talk about more in the panel. Before Playground Music, I was at Universal Music Sweden. So I've worked in both the major sector and in the sector of the music industry.
Great, thank you, Saki. And then we have David from Mexico. Oh no.
Yeah. Hey everybody. So I'm David Weisfeld. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Soundcharts. Prior to that, I actually worked at Universal in Paris for 9 years, and I was running international marketing for the 5 last year of that period. When I left, I started a management company that still manages a few artists, including a fairly large streaming artist called Petit Biscuit. And I just didn't have a tool that worked for me, neither at UMG or after. And very long story short, I started Soundcharts, which ended up being a VC-backed company, and who now works with over 600, mostly medium and large size music company, not so much the smaller. And we can talk about why data is not used by the longer tail. And so Soundcharts basically is sort of like a Bloomberg for the music industry. We track a bunch of data, but most importantly, we make it actionable, fast. We notify people what's going on. So you can use it for three main use cases, either for discovery, so to discover new talent and what's going on in the chart, as if you would browse different type of charts, custom charts and so forth, and have preferences and block lists. The second, which is developing talent. So you're using Soundcharts to track your roster and to get notified and reports and automate the whole, not the strategy part, but actually the base, the layer, the reporting part, which is very redundant and tedious and so forth. And then the third usage is using our API as a platform to build your own product. And then people build a bunch of stuff on the API, including predictive models and so forth. So we can talk about that later. And that third part is more of an enterprise type thing. And so people use us for royalty auditing, anticipating what the PROs are going to pay them, predicting success with their own proprietary algorithms on it, auditing metadata and so forth.
Okay, great. So basically, we're talking a lot about now how to succeed in predicting whether a song will position on a playlist or on a top list in a country, in the streaming paradigm that we're living right now, which is totally different from the old paradigm when we were selling a product. We were actually having a kind of an agnostic relationship with the end users. We were selling the product, and then we didn't know how much they were listening or using the product. Now we are in a situation where every single stream is stored. So the information on how long it's been going on and where it was happening and so on. So if we start from your perspective, David, and look at the platform that you have and so on, what would you say is the best way of using your technology in predictive purposes? What do you think?
So there are multiple ways to use us. Either if you're a medium or larger size company, either you want to build on top of an API or you want to get a data dump and then populate some kind of Airtable or something on your side. And then usually the algorithms will be on the client side. We will be the data provider. People don't want to plug to 35 APIs. They don't want to have radio monitoring, fingerprinting, metadata matching, all the boring stuff that requires backend engineering. And also there's a network effect. If we clean ISRC and ISWC for 1 million tracks for one client, the same tracks are actually published by probably 3, 4, 5 different publishers. So we can afford to kind of, and probably the artist and the manager will also maybe use the product. So by cleaning things, we have a network effect that allows us to do more of the back end boring stuff. I think the number one rule for anything predictive is no matter how good the algorithm, if your data set is dirty or mismatched or lacking holes or whatever it is, anything on it just can't work. Imagine you're making a cake and the base ingredients are not good. You can be the best chef in the world. That's just not going to work. So a lot of companies right now are hiring data scientists, data engineer, or engineer, or maybe even people who are more analysts coming from the finance world to work on data. And most of these people either have relative SQL experience, or at least they can talk the language enough to maybe have a firm or a consultant or a developer do it for them. And so that's one obvious layer. We do the boring stuff so that everybody can have their predictive model on it. There's a sense of confidentiality also for each of these clients. If you're trying to build something to have leverage over everybody else, that specific tech cannot come from us, because otherwise we would sell the same algorithms to 25 clients and therefore kind of leverage level the market. So that's the first kind of non-answer I can give you is by doing all of the stuff, we're pre-chewing, we're pre-cooking. Go back to the recipe analogy. I'm going to the supermarket, getting all the nice ingredient. If you want to cook, it's just there in your door in a unified, centralized way. And then so people can build on top. And then the other thing about sound charts that what we've realized is that people, I mean, it's the same in any kind of business. People will always say that they want to do things that are more research-based, and then when they get in the fire of the moment, they need stuff that are very, very short-term. So it's, should I call this radio to know if I just got played to say thanks and try to push? And I just need to have like this instant reporting. And a lot of the things that are leveraged, so if you take an example, you know, could we predict Lil Nas X or something? The reality is, while for the audience, it seems like it was like he wasn't known and then he was known, Amuse, the distributor, knew that it was blowing up just because it's very, very visible if you come out of like just have this thing that was doing nothing and then does something. But every record label in the world could see the same thing. There is not that many songs that come out of the pile that big. And so the story is right now he signed to Sony, but the Amuse people were very vocal about the fact that they gave $1 million to the artist. He just wanted to sign to somebody else and everybody knew it was blowing up. So there's a sense of like, what is really predictive? Maybe we can go into that. Like, what are you trying to predict? If you're trying to predict 5-day, 10-day, 15-day growth on a social media or social platform, that's one thing. But then for us as a actionable platform, not talking about API, but talking about our front end, that is not actionable enough for somebody to, like, if I tell you your growth is going to go from 12,000 subscribers to 16,000 subscribers in the next month. If you are the manager or the artist or the person working, if you look at the graph on YouTube and you compare yourself with 15 artists on the platform, you know that graph is not just going to stop. There is also a habit of seeing numbers. So it's kind of a non-answer, but one is the data layer and the API. And second is reality. People are trying to predict very short-term thing. And by notifying them and making sure that they have a unified way of seeing everything, the professional goes very quickly if he has the data to actually know what's going on. And I think the problem has been a vision with holes rather than us trying to predict something for 6 months.
Yeah, I think
Sorry for the long answer.
Yeah, but I think you're totally correct that a lot of this is about, I mean, there's one thing having a lot of data and using the data and let the machine predict something into the future. It's another thing, the feeling of what is happening and actually creating the future. I mean, prediction is not only about sitting objectively and seeing something. It's also an interaction where you are a part of making the prediction happen. And I think if you go to SAC, you are working with I mean, some of the largest artists. You're the biggest independent label in Scandinavia. How are you using data in trying to find artists, find success, and kind of not only predict, but also create the prediction, so to speak, be a part of what is happening?
Yeah, I totally agree with David. If we have a graph that says this is going to happen within a couple of weeks or a couple of months, that's not going to help me on a day-to-day basis. I have to take that graph and utilize it and make something out of it, put my marketing efforts into continuing growing that graph, or if a graph is going down, market our way back up. So just having the predictions is not enough. There's also like the human factor and the human knowledge that needs to be put on top of the predictions, or else nothing's going to happen. And also, I come from a social media background. A track can go viral overnight, so a prediction can never be accurately predicted, I would say. So unless you take the data and do something with it, you don't really have much leverage. But yeah, we use data on multiple types of way. Basically, we use it for marketing, we use it for A&Ring. Are we signing the right type of artists? Are we releasing our tracks in the right cycle, release cycle? Are we using our marketing spend in a proper way? That's all the type of ways we use.
Would you say that each label have kind of their own secret sauce, or is there a general model that is being used?
I would general model. I would say that everyone is working with it in quite a different way. So no, there's not a general model at all. It's if there were, we'd all be doing equally well. And
yeah, I mean, it's like everyone is searching for that magic button you can press that says, okay, put your money in this artist and this track, and then you will be so rich. You know, if we're talking it from success from a monetary point of view. But it's not that easy, is it? If it were that easy, I think music would become boring. But that's my own opinion. But
if I had money every time someone told me to create viral content, I would be.
Yeah. So it's about knowledge, I guess. The data is one thing, the graphs are another thing, but the really important thing is knowledge, to understand. And Sophie, your background as a data scientist and what you did in your PhD studies and very interesting research you have done. I really urge everyone to look at what Sophie has done in the past. I guess knowledge is the thing. How do you use data at Spinnen?
Well, so we also don't have a predefined roadmap of where to use analytics and in which way to forecast success. But we just came up with our own constructs of how to use data across various branches of the company. And for me, apart from business development, we have A&R, product, and then marketing and after release. And they're just different ways of incorporating the data. So for A&R, it might be very valuable to assess what are current genre trends that are going on. Are there maybe possibly two genres overlapping where a new genre is likely to emerge? For product, it might be very essential to find out who is the core audience of a certain artist. Is it possibly expanding? Could we maybe urge this expansion with the next release? And what are the attributes that those like additionally newly acquired fans cherish, and how could we cater them even better? And then for like a post-release strategy from the marketing side, we could look at have we used a certain strategy in prior releases which has proven to be successful, and would this be likely to match this current release as well? And on top of that, we could build some learning algorithms which would enable us to understand even more about what's working and what's not in certain contexts, and also to help us interpret graphs, because I also as well as David and Saki like to say that, well, it's kind of hard to make exact predictions, and there's still a human factor to the release of musical content. And the artists and their music are still the best predictor of success for me, but knowing more about the audience and the market and release strategies can be enabled by analytics, and that's where we always try to like rope them in and then come up with our own model of how to use data within our release cycle. Yeah,
very interesting. I mean, this becomes a general question to all three of you. I mean, we're sitting here on stage, not physically, but virtually, and we're talking about data and the enormous amounts of data that we have available, and we're creating these models and algorithms and ways in trying to understand the connection between Facebook and Spotify and the connection between TikTok and YouTube, and really trying to grasp what is happening. If you compare this to the music industry 15 or 20 years ago, what has happened? It's an open question. How do you think, I mean, how big is this change? And I guess we could already now put up the question, what does this mean for the music industry in the coming 10 years? What do you think?
Who goes first? Who goes first?
David, you're waving a little bit.
Oh no, I was actually, because it's kind of like look and say.
Yeah. Go ahead, David. It's an open question because it's yeah.
So I mean, to answer your question short, yeah, it's a huge change. I'm 36. 15 years ago, I was 21. Yeah, so like 15 years ago, I mean, not even the data analytics, predictive analytics, but like the word data science, data scientist, the cloud, the idea of people doing, trying to predict things in music. We were not there. But like in terms of connectivity, 15 years ago, I don't think there was like even like 1G or 2G, or maybe it was like BlackBerry time or something like that. Like it was social media. I don't know if I think YouTube pages and YouTube, like music on YouTube and Facebook and stuff like 2007, something like that. So, I mean, that's like ancient time. But yeah, the thing about the where it's going and where it's been, I was thinking about why we haven't really nailed it in music. Like, how come there is not one quant? Like, you know, people know like quant is like a very high level math guy who works usually in finance and try to do predictive models and like financial things. How come there's not like this like label that has figured it out with like 5 quants and like signing all the little NASAX of the world because they know everything? And I think I was thinking about what has been the predictive industries and what have not. And for example, there are things that are completely not human impacted or very not as fast paced, like the weather, for example. And the weather, if you have the right sensors and the historical data, you know that if there's a storm there with a wind of that direction, I mean, we humans can try to impact as much, and there's a lot of problems with global warming. But in the next 24 hours, if the storm is that dimension, with that intensity, with that wind, it will be in that other place, especially that there are billions and billions of sensors and historical data and probably open data and shared across the world for all the weather people and stuff. And so as a result, the weather, while we think is not so well predicted, which is a proof that it remains even hard, is pretty much predicted. If I give you the week's forecast in 1,000 cities in the world, it's probably 95%, 99% correct. Which in music, if somebody had a 95% correct algorithm, he'd have market share by himself. And then I thought about finance and how in finance there are some things like potentially what letter, like what score an agency is going to put to a country, that you go from A to B or C. That type of stuff is predictive-ish. People thought like gold and price of like those types of assets was predictive-ish. Lately, we've seen with the crisis that maybe it's not. And then there is on the other spectrum, people who are like gambling with crypto for good or bad, people making money, losing money. And we see that it's very hard. Again, if somebody had figured it out, he'd own all the crypto. And so like there is a spectrum of like some industries are just much harder than others. And I think 15 years ago in music, we're starting the digital landscape. There was like, iTunes download and maybe the beginning of like YouTube videos and Facebook. And that was like 1, 2, 3. In the past 15 years, if you had built a model 5 years ago based on Snapchat and Twitter before Instagram took off, you would be wrong a year later. The pattern of like localization of social platforms and the fact that it's not like, you can't really look what's in TikTok without actually having access to an API, which doesn't really exist. So there's a lot of things that it just makes music is just harder. So we've come and humans as I don't know if it was Sophie or you were saying, but like you can't. Oh no, actually it was you. Like you can't predict what really goes on one night. Like Mariah Carey does a cover of a Sinatra song at midnight, and then for some reason at 8 a.m. there's 1 million people who are now singing Sinatra, and Sinatra gets a plus 300%. You can't really predict that. So I think in 5 or 10 years, what's going to happen is we're going to have a lot more tools. People are going to be better, but also. Is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, WhatsApp, are they going to be the platforms in 15 years? Is it going to be radio and TV? And so if the platforms keep evolving as the algorithm keep evolving, then the reality is we're always going to be behind, kind of in the very, very top level of finance, where there is the best minds, trying to make a lot of money in those sectors, and they still figure it out, lose, figure it out, lose, figure it out, lose. It's never really won. So who knows, in 15 years, we'll have to track a virtual reality world where if you talk about something in Fortnite, it gets like, you know, it's going to change. And I think companies like mine, when I look back at my product roadmap, when we started in 2014 and the things we track today and how we track it, we have pivoted without really pivoting, because it's the same mission. It's very, very precise what we try to do. But we've added, removed, changed, switched so many things in the past 6 years just because the industry has changed. And I think that is the one thing that is going to speed up in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think TikTok is going to win forever, just like Instagram didn't win forever, just like Facebook didn't win forever. So again, sorry, long answer, but it's going to go very far. But I don't think anybody is really going to figure it out and just win it all, just like in finance or any other industries.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and I would like you also to hear from you, Saki and Sophie, I think the music industry has changed because of this possibility. Because I mean, in the end, what we need to understand are the different algorithms and the different recommendation functions that are on each platform. So for example, TikTok has recommendation algorithms that are very aggressive and hooked up into your own personal usage of the app. So you can have in a feed, a lot of people can get a very famous TikToker and then someone that is totally unknown. So it's another kind of algorithm if you compare it to, for example, YouTube, or if you compare it to Spotify. So there are different recipes, so to speak, on each of these platforms, and these have become, I think, more and more crucial to understand. So, Saki, if you look at it from an indie perspective, how the independent sector has been influenced by this, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But the algorithms on these social media platforms they change really quick. I can have a Facebook workshop on the algorithms almost every week. And I think it's because we're coming from a place where data wasn't really a thing to 15 years ago. And then now, maybe like 7 years ago, it's like, oh, data, that's a cool thing. Whereas today, we know that data is power. Owning your data makes you powerful, or owning any data make you powerful. So there's a reluctantness, there's a hesitant, the platforms are hesitant to share data and to sort of keep the algorithms static, just because if they do that, people like us are going to come in and we're going to crack the algorithm, and they are not going to control their data anymore. We are. So I would say that is like the biggest change.
So music industry has become an hacking industry.
Yeah, I would say that although music is still like the #1 product, data is a big part of it as well. Maybe not for record labels as such, but as secondhand companies like David's company, for instance. There's so much more to music now than just the record labels and the CD shops.
And still, I guess, I mean, just as Sophie said before, it's still about the music. I mean, these are tools parallel to the love of music and the interest of artists. But of course, if you have these kinds of tools and the possibility to at least have some kind of feeling of what probably is going to happen because of what you have learned earlier, of course, it's a very good tool. I mean, Sophie, you've been working with many artists, and as you say, you're working with several departments and so on. Do you have any, if you look at the music industry changing, so do you have any good examples of when you feel that you can share? I don't know if you can share anything, but good examples of when you've been able to analyze data in a good way and say that this will probably happen, or we have to move this way, or this is the playlist, or something.
Well, I do believe that, like, in general, tokens have become way more important, and that also sort of ties into what Saki said, that the data gets way more powerful, but there are also some security concerns which we have to take into consideration. But just having that token data allows you to understand the behavior and the preferences of audiences listening, for example, to specific playlist. And that allows you to tailor playlists specifically to the preferences of those listeners as well as their listening history. And by using tokens, and for example, Spinnin' Records has had a big project which we've been working on and have already put into place for algotorial playlists, which are half personalized and half curated playlists with two different buckets of tracks. But I said half of it is based on the history of a certain listener, and also takes into consideration certain musical attributes you want that playlist to include. And that really lets you personalize a playlist and add specific tracks from a branding perspective and marketing perspective from your label, and also having direct contact to those users as they consented to using those tokens beforehand. We'll be able to address them directly, tell them that there's a certain playlist available. You can create a higher level of interaction, as we did with the Find Your Tempo playlist, which was an algotorial playlist where we would reach out to our users and tell them, you can click on this link, it would transfer it to a website. You would decide what running tempo you would like, what EDM genre you'd prefer, as well as a few other criteria. But just in a really easy, like 4-page process, we'd allow them to help us create a personalized playlist for them, which they could in the end then save in their playlist category on Spotify and go back to the next time they go running. And I think this is one way of how data allowed us to create something really personalized, build a bigger connection and get more engagement with our users. And this is something we could have never imagined 15 years ago, I believe. At least I wouldn't have.
No, I agree that using data in that kind of way. I mean, the music industry was quite straightforward earlier. Now it's very much more complicated behind the scenes, and we're talking playlists here now that have become some kind of very important vehicles or exposure platform for music. Can we predict, is it possible to predict which playlist that is optimal for a specific artist or for a specific track? Can we do that? Because I mean, playlists are so important right now. So say that a label would like to know that it's, well, you have these 10 playlists. Which one should I focus on? Is it possible?
Well, I do believe that there are a few playlists which have a very wide reach, a lot of followers and a lot of occasional listeners, which would, of course, create a lot of streams as well as revenue. But I think you should look at it from a broader perspective, because you're catering to a wide audience, and well, while there are certain contexts where a track is more likely to fit in, let's say if you have an EDM artist, you're more likely to be found in a workout playlist or in a party playlist rather than a Sunday relaxing playlist. There are like some obvious distinctions, but you should still try to target multiple ones in order to be able to like cater to multiple audience groups. But curating an artist's unique playlist is, of course, one approach of like being very straightforward about what the content is. And then, curating your relations to certain streaming platforms will also allow you to like be in a position to pitch better to be listed in higher scoring playlists. But yes, I would not only focus on one singular playlist, but rather look at the breadth and also not look at a only playlist strategy. but rather maybe let's tie in some social media. Let's go back to TikTok. What about user-generated content on YouTube? It's a wider playing field, and we shouldn't forget about the breadth of that ecosystem and where we can position our music.
It's interesting because, I mean, we are in the situation in the music industry compared to 15, 20 years ago, when people having the main or important power in the music industry were actually mostly male, middle-aged, and they had a situation where they would go like this, and they would say this will succeed, and then it would succeed because they had the possibility to decide almost. And now we are in a situation where we have data scientists with PhD degrees, doctors, and really professionals on data that are choosing a lot of this. I think it is a very big change, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this will develop in the coming 10, 20 years, I think. It's just I hadn't prepared this analysis. It just came up to me that it is a really, really big change that you are describing. Another thing I would like to bring up is, I didn't prepare you for this question, but we've had a big problem of fake streams on streaming services. And in the A&R process, one wants to find an artist or a track or something that is increasing in popularity. What do you think about this problem in the prediction context? Is it a big problem with fake streams, people buying a lot of Spotify streams and YouTube streams and TikTok views, etc.? And how is it influencing the A&R process when predicting success? What do you think, David?
Short answer is it shouldn't. Unless the artist is a magician, you can't really fake real success. It worked a few years ago, where literally if somebody saw our YouTube counter, he would go berserk and be like, "Oh my God, this thing is going nuts on YouTube." But today, the first reflex is you go check out the Instagram. You see the ratio of engagement to likes. You see if it's a cross-platform thing. You see if some influencers or people who usually speak about those genres are starting to speak about it. And then pretty fast, if the thing is really a buzz, the industry is going to be in contact with the team, or there's going to be a network effect. Like, for example, if it's a DJ, it might be, hey, this DJ knows like all the other five. Like at one point, there's always a talk. You don't like just send an email to something that you see because a Spotify stream is going up. Usually people use data really to find things, and then very quickly it's a human thing. At one point it's going to be like, hey, John Doe at Gmail that I saw on SoundCloud, I love your track, let's talk. Or people are like DMing the artist on Instagram, whatever the A&R is going to try to get the first contact with, being in the club whenever people were still in the club. But like going to try to get the artist before anybody else, or after the first show at this small festival that you heard they were playing, you go and then you go see. Like there's still that part. And so an artist that's just buying things, the artist would have to be extremely smart, rational and wealthy to buy the same amount on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, globally, according to his demographics. Like they have to understand on the other side, there's people like Sophie who are saying like, well, in your genre, if you come from Rotterdam and you're doing this type of EDM, there's a 80% chance that's kind of where your fan is. So you better buy the right streams from the right people at the right time. Otherwise you kind of get exposed. So I think that was a real like kind of Ponzi scheme or like tulip situation where everybody, like a lot of rappers and electronic people just started to do it. And then a couple got scammed, a couple got exposed, and people are being a little bit more, down, or people who do it are not the ones who are going to anyway get huge checks. What there is though is like there is a new breed now of companies who are trying to entice artists and paying them, and that is a big. I don't think like the ones who do end up getting signed by Spinning or any other or Playground or any other smart label. But there is a lot of artists getting scammed right now. And I have an Instagram where I am logged in as my own artist, just like any manager. I have like my artist's Instagram. And so I'm seeing what they're being targeted with and the types of ads that they're seeing compared to what I'm seeing. It goes back to what Saki was saying with TikTok, like everybody's very, very getting a personal thing. So we're not getting the same ads. There's a good, like the Netflix Social Dilemma thing that just came out is actually a good one on that. And so what they're getting is actually like, click here, buy streams, do this, enter in the playlist. And they're paying like $50, $100, $200. And we see that that's a huge problem. Like the similar artist would never put $100 on his Instagram marketing to try to actually get fans, but because they think that's quick money, that's quick fame. And it's sad to see that, of course, as an artist, if you think you get a chance, you're going to go for the casino kind of moment and not for the hard work. They get, I know a lot of artists, and I know a lot of these companies who are making, like the companies making decent amounts of money, and very organized and very, very methodical. And that's a big problem. I think the problem stops where the smart labels actually just see it, and so it's more a scam of the long tail than a scam of the actual industry at this point. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree a little bit. On the other hand, when we're not talking very long periods here, I mean, this was something that was a big 1.5, 2 years ago, and as you say, it has decreased now.
So what I meant is
things is happening very fast. Yeah.
Yes, what I meant is in the last 2 or 3 years, like we're not the first data company. There was Next Big Sound and Music Metric and Big Champagne. Big Champagne was very and then they just got bought by that nation. The Next Big Sound, people are used to now seeing Facebook, YouTube, whatever metric, and it kind of makes sense. And so I think that in the last 2 years, it has become a lot more democratic. Like people really use platforms like ours, and we're not the only ones. People are used to even going to like a social backer and like just seeing like public stats for free. So yeah, in the past 2 years, I feel the A&Rs are more savvy. People are getting less excited. Like, oh my God, this thing on YouTube is blowing up. The first reflex is going to be at least to go on Instagram, Facebook, and whatever other network the artist is on to see if something matches and if the engagement correlates. And the like to engagement ratio, that sort of language has become, I think, very democratic. You're right, since 2 years, like 3 scam, but yeah.
Okay, Antonia,
Yes?
I think we are coming into the Q&A part of this panel, are we?
It should be time for the Q&A, but we don't have any questions. Sometimes the chat just falls down.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
No, not very good.
No, you cannot. Can you hear me now?
Increase a little bit, yes.
Yes. We don't have any questions because sometimes the chat just falls down. And so if you want among yourselves to answer one last question, make one last comment, because we have only 2 minutes left, you can do so now.
Okay. Do you have any question, Antonia?
I have all the questions.
Okay.
Actually, you already responded. One of the questions that was, spinning around in circles in my mind, which was, what about AR? But you already responded it in a way, because I don't know much about music data in this depth. But when I think about success in terms of music industry, I can help but thinking about, I was saying at the introduction about intuition, what an AR person used to do, which was basically go to shows in maybe not very known places to find about artists that nobody knew, but that they had something. And they would work with these artists in order to polish their style, their looks, to train them, and to start helping them grow their careers, and hopefully becoming successful. And I'm not sure if data can help with this, because I think that, I'm not sure if an algorithm can do something that I think humans can do. It's like being moved by something, by an artist, by their music, by the way that they express themselves. But I also think that data is very useful on a day-to-day basis to just work. And actually, I think it should be more available to artists, because normally labels work with data, distributors work with data, communication people work with data, but artists, I think that they are not very savvy about this and very, very blind about the possibilities. Also, it doesn't help that most platforms are opaque in terms of data. So I just hope that a project like Futurepulse would help also not just the industry, but the artists to be more aware about what data they can use to build their careers.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know how much time we have, but...
Not much, but...
Yeah, just to perhaps conclude, I mean, the platform that we build in this project is very much focused on trying to predict popularity levels of genres, artists, and tracks. But I mean, no one could foresee the corona pandemic or COVID-19. We haven't even talked about this, but what we saw was that when we started to get in data into the system, it was possible to see that certain tracks would rise by 500% or 900% even because of the corona pandemic. But 2 months before, it was totally impossible to foresee that these tracks would be popular. Yeah. So it is, I mean, real-time events can have a very crucial effect on trying to predict both catalog and frontline music. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's also useful to unearth things that are there in the platforms that at a certain point they gain visibility and they emerge and become popular, which I think is really good. So we need to say goodbye. Thank you very much, Futurepulse.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks, Saki. Thanks, David. Very, very good.
Daniel, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. You are the last panel. It's been great. And so I say goodbye to you. Bye-bye. I don't say goodbye to the audience that they are watching in their homes or wherever they are. This was the last Sónar+D CCCB panel, but this is not the last thing on the streaming, no. From now on until midnight, you can get connected because there are a bunch of concerts coming up. Don't go, stay here. It's been a pleasure to be with you and present these things during these 2 days. But now it's time for me and the rest of the team to dance a little bit. Bye-bye.